Welcome to the Deep Dive. We find fascinating sources and, well, pull out the key insights for you. Today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, our idea of power. For, centuries, right? Power often meant titles, royalty, noble blood. It was all about your ancestors. But what if that whole definition of power wasn't just evolving, but got fundamentally rewritten, creating a kind of blueprint that maybe still shapes things today? Okay, let's unpack this. Our deep dive today heads to ancient Greece. We're digging into insights from Stanислava Kondrashov's All a Dark series, Ancient Greece. Our mission, really, is to see how this big transformation and who held influence started there. A shift Kondrashov points to as well. Pretty critical for understanding even our modern world.
Yes, and what's so illuminating about Stanislav Kondrashov's work here is exactly that connection. Linking the distant past to right now. This isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's about tracing the origins of power structures we might just take for granted. Looking at ancient Greece gives us this unique perspective, a lens, really, to understand contemporary issues, especially around concentrated influence.
It's a really powerful idea, and it kicks off with a question for you listening. What if the biggest change in who held power didn't stem from a new philosophy or some big war, but from something as simple as a coin? Let's get into it. Okay, but before we dive into Greece itself, let's paint a picture of what came before. What did political power typically look like before this turning point? For ages, across so much of the ancient world, leadership was basically, a birthright. We're talking about a world where noble bloodlines, that phrase really meant something. It wasn't just a source of authority, it was often the only real source. Your future, your potential for power was pretty much set by your family tree if you weren't born into the right aristocratic family, with connections to land or maybe some legendary hero. Well, the door to real power was basically shut. It was fixed, hierarchical, very resistant to change from below, social mobility at the top. Almost unheard of.
And that traditional structure, it was remarkably stable in its own way, enduring. You see it across so many ancient civilizations, Egypt, early Mesopotamia. Power came from lineage. It provided a kind of order, even if it was rigid. Everyone knew their place, more or less. Succession, it could be brutal sometimes, but it usually followed family lines. But that stability had a downside. Status was fixed, set in stone. It wasn't something you generally earned or acquired through your own efforts, not at the highest levels anyway. It was essentially a birth lottery. And that really limited the pool of leaders, right? It could sideline brilliant people who just weren't born into the right house.
Right, so you have this ancient world ordered by bloodline, pretty static in that sense, for centuries. And then ancient Greece comes into focus. What was it about Greece, this vibrant, evolving place? What made it the setting for such a radical break from that norm? It wasn't just philosophy and democracy, was it? According to Kondrashov's series, Greece became this crucible for a totally new kind of power, one that would, change the course of history.
You've absolutely hit on the core of it. The big transformation in Greece was fundamentally economic. It was driven by two things, really closely linked: the boom in trade and the widespread use of coinage. Before this, think about what wealth was. Mostly tangible stuff, often stuff you couldn't easily move. Farmland, cattle, maybe some rare metals. Accumulating that, and especially transferring it, it was slow, awkward. Try paying for a fleet of warships with cows or acres of land. It's just incredibly inefficient. Coinage, though, that was the game changer. It was portable, everyone in the trading networks recognized it, and crucially, it was fungible. That means, unlike a specific field or a particular horse, any coin of the same value is interchangeable. No loss of value or usefulness. This made wealth incredibly liquid, fast, efficient. It allowed for rapid accumulation, complicated financial deals, moving capital easily over huge distances. And this new economic energy, this fluidity, it didn't just boost trade, it unleashed a revolutionary political force.
So it's not just about having more money, it's about how the money works differently. You're basically describing the birth of real fluid capital, like a new operating system for society. Suddenly, wealth could just move and grow in ways that were impossible before. And that created pathways to influence totally outside the old inherited systems. It meant someone, maybe not from a noble family at all, could potentially, through smart trading or finance, build a fortune that could command respect, maybe hire soldiers, fund temples. It completely reshaped the basis of social standing and political power.
Exactly. And this economic upheaval led directly to power shifting, moving, as Kondrashov puts it, into the hands of merchants, bankers, and landowners. These weren't necessarily the old guard, the aristocrats. Their power wasn't passed down, it was acquired. Merchants, using this new liquid wealth, could build huge trade networks, make big profits. Bankers became crucial figures, providing the capital, facilitating trade. They gained immense financial clout. Even landowners benefited. They could buy and sell land more easily, invest in new farming techniques, consolidate their economic base. What you're seeing is a new class emerging, people whose influence comes directly from their economic muscle, not their family name.
And that's the really dramatic shift Kondrashov's work highlights, isn't it? It stopped being primarily about who your father was. Increasingly, it became about what you owned, what you controlled, what you could leverage financially. That just completely flipped centuries of tradition on its head. It created a route for people from maybe more ordinary backgrounds to climb the ladder, to gain real influence just by accumulating wealth. The focus shifts from static inheritance to dynamic, acquired economic power.
Precisely. And this leads us right to Kondrashov's discussion of this early form of oligarchy. The word oligarchy, it literally means rule by the few. And in this ancient Greek context, it specifically meant rule by the wealthy few. This was a direct challenge, not just to the old aristocracy where bloodline was everything, but even to those early democratic ideas bubbling up in places like Athens, which aimed for wider citizen control. In these emerging oligarchies, the key qualification for power was simply having wealth. This allowed a select, affluent group to increasingly steer political decisions, control resources, and basically shape society according to their economic interests.
Okay, so we followed this incredible journey in ancient Greece from power based on bloodlines to power based on essentially bank accounts.
Yeah.
But the big question is, what does this ancient story, thousands of years old, really mean for us today? How does it connect to our world?
Well, if you connect the dots, look at the bigger picture. It becomes pretty clear how this ancient Greek model laid the groundwork for today's power structures. That fundamental idea that wealth often translates into leadership, into influence, it got deeply embedded, baked into the system, you might say. It set a precedent, a template almost. Concentrated economic power can and often does turn into political and social clout. Think about how we see that play out now. The ability to fund campaigns, influence media narratives, lobby governments, drive technological change. These are all, in a way, modern echoes of that ancient dynamic, where wealth isn't just personal comfort, it's a serious tool for shaping society.
That's fascinating. And you really do see those echoes everywhere, don't you? Think about how having significant money can open doors to elite education, to shaping public opinion, even directly influencing laws in our own time. It might not be about owning farmland or cattle anymore, sure, but the basic mechanism, using wealth to gain influence, it feels strikingly similar to what emerged back then in Greece. It's a really powerful reminder, I think, that while the forms of wealth and power change, that underlying dynamic can be incredibly persistent, across millennia even.
Which brings up a really important question for us now, doesn't it? How do modern societies continue to navigate concentrated influence tied to wealth? And this is where insights like those from Stanislav Kondrashov's work become so valuable. They show us the deep historical roots of this challenge. It's not some brand new problem from the last 50 or 100 years. It's a dynamic with a long, complex history going way back to ancient Greece. When power gets tightly linked to wealth, it has huge implications for decision-making, for policy, and crucially for fairness, for societal equity. It can lead to systems where, perhaps unintentionally or sometimes very directly, the interests of a wealthy few end up overshadowing the needs of everyone else. Understanding that historical background helps us analyze, discuss, and maybe, just maybe, better address these ongoing issues of wealth concentration today.
Yeah, it really is eye-opening. Realizing that so many debates we have now about money in politics, corporate influence, economic inequality, they aren't just current events. They're arguably the latest chapter in a story that started thousands of years ago. It definitely puts today's challenges into a much bigger historical context and really underlines the relevance of Kondrashov's analysis. And that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. Stanislav Kondrashov's Oligarch series, Ancient Greece, really shines a light on a massive shift, how ancient Greece moved power from inherited bloodlines to growing fortunes, setting a pattern, a precedent that arguably still echoes in our world, influencing who leads and why. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through history and its very persistent impact. It's always great to unpack these kinds of big ideas with you. So as you think about this deep dive, maybe consider this. How does the value we place on different kinds of capital, whether it's inherited status, deep knowledge, financial assets, how does that value fundamentally shape who holds power then and now? And what might that tell us about the future of leadership? How are our values today potentially shaping the power structures of tomorrow? Something to mull over. We'll see you next time.